cats and kits, Captain Zorikh here, and happy day before Memorial Day, second day of the 3-day Memorial Day weekend to you all. First off, let's get this out of the way. Memorial Day and Veterans Day are not the same thing. Veterans Day, to oversimplify, is when we celebrate and thank those of our members of armed forces who are still kicking and used to be in the Army. And Memorial Day is when we salute those who gave the ultimate sacrifice in the name of their country, etc. So this is the weekend where we pay our tribute to those who gave their all in the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country. Now, it is also the weekend in which it's the unofficial start of summer, and I am paying tribute to that cultural, non-secular, non-nationalist holiday by wearing a ball cap, sunglasses. Actually, these are transitions. They turn dark in the sunshine. Hey, my glasses transition. Transition can be good. And drinking beer. All right. There's been a whole lot of anti-woke sentiment about these three particular beers. This one, because they made one particular special edition can for a social influencer who happens to appreciate their product, or they had some kind of deal or arrangement going on or so forth, and that he put it on his podcast or live stream or whatever, that really is only watched, or is targeted towards people who enjoy and appreciate who and what she is. And I don't remember if I used the proper pronoun correctly, and if I didn't, I apologize, because whatever she or they want to use is up to them, and I will perfectly be happy to go along with it, because it doesn't hurt me anywhere. I can't show you on the doll. So now I think, so we're going to have a little taste test of these three. This one here, they put out a commercial in which they had a fully clothed woman recognizing that maybe not everybody in America sees an image of a mostly naked woman in quite the same way as a straight guy does. Hey, it doesn't suck to respect the way other people might see certain images. And hey, they made a TV commercial about it, and what do you know? Next thing you know, the people who didn't like this. But they had a different reaction. These guys backpedaled so quickly they tripped over their feet. These guys, not so much. And these guys, well, I remember when I was in college, they engaged in union-busting tactics and had formaldehyde in it, which is what I heard. And so I basically decided to, these were like the evil, bad guys of the beer world. And but now, I forget exactly what it was that they did recently. I suppose I should have checked the interwebs on my phone that I'm now using to talk to you with to figure out what it was. But it kind of really doesn't matter. All right, if there's a certain demographic, a certain socio-political demographic that doesn't like something, I can pretty much be assured that there's probably nothing wrong with it. Like, for instance, this hat. It's an American tradition to wear a ball cap in summertime, sometimes even backwards. And now that I'm wearing it backwards, if you're watching this on Facebook and I haven't flipped it over and you're watching it on YouTube, you should hold it up to a mirror so you can see the name of the superhero that the hat represents. Captain Marvel. That would be Marvel Comics' current version of Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, who is a female who wears an outfit that is about as revealing as the one in the Miller Lite commercial that the woman is revealing. And ever since that day, and then she got her hair cut, and the next thing you know, folks with YouTube channels like Diversity in Comics, misleading piece of clickbait if ever there was one, are calling her Carl Manvers and whatnot, because she's not showing enough skin or quite as many curves, and also the whole anti-Brie Larson thing. Now, I love all Captain Marvels. I don't care if it's a big red cheese or a little Brie. I'm still for it, and I'm looking at what I like about it. And I happen to like the way this superhero has been presented in Marvel Comics as of late, because I find her inspiring. And by the way, this here is also a Captain Marvel. This is the logo of Marvel Comics' first Captain Marvel, Marvel, and this logo was also used for a time by his cloned, artificially grown son, Genisvel. Now, we don't know if Marvel was just straight or not. We only knew him to have two loves in his life, Medic Una and Carol Danvers herself, before she became a superhero. But we do know that Genisvel was not only non-gender specific, because over in Kree world called Hala, that's, a thing, being non-gender specific. That's just what everybody by default is. He's also non-species specific, because he was basically like a Prince Hal type, getting drunk and screwing around with whatever piece of alien tail happened to be on that particular space station bar at that night. So we're going to taste test these beers and see how they live up to the reputation of the companies. Now, they're still cold because I just got them from the 7-Eleven 2 doors down from me, and have only been out here in the sun for about 10 minutes while I was setting this up. Okay, here we go. Bud Light. All right, Bud was known as the champagne of beers. It stole the name from a town out in Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, one of those Germanic nations. Anyway, here we go. But they changed their formula during World War II to appeal to female factory workers, because all the men who were drinking Budweiser were off in the war. So let's see what Bud Light tastes like. It tastes like an American beer. I'll be honest, I haven't drunk much beer in the past few years, because a lot of beer lately has this kind of, a lot of beer selections is IPA, and as people have told me, that's a fake near beer created for British sailors, and I find IPAs really bitter, and I thought a lot of beers these days, did I just lose my taste for bitter beer, or is beer more bitter these days? But that's cool and refreshing, and it has a taste of beer. Okay, so I am going to now try to cleanse my palate with this water here, in this water bottle from Bartless Weighted Suits. They're not a sponsor of anything. I just happen to really like their product when I saw it at the Arnold Sports Festival when I was there with Gladiators NYC earlier this year. And I think it would be really, they're suits that you've heard of weighted vests. Well, instead they put the weight all arms, legs, chest, back, so you've got your whole body is heavier instead of just your shoulder bearing all this weight. And I think that would be probably a pretty good training device for a sport like medieval armored combat. Okay, tap water, New York City, world's finest. All right, let's try the original light beer. Note how they misspelled light so that they could trademark it. As the tagline said, it's both taste great and less filling. And they're also partly responsible for people using the word less instead of fewer. As in, a third less calories in a regular beer, and it tastes great. Though it should be a third fewer, but that doesn't fly so trippingly over the tongue as a third less. All right, here we go. So, it tastes great, less filling. Those are great classic commercials. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just go to YouTube or something and search engine tastes great, less filling, and laugh for the next hour or so watching those commercials. Here we go. Light beer from Miller. Truth to tell, tastes almost exactly the same as Bud Light. I really wouldn't complain if I ordered a Bud Light and got a light beer from Miller, and I wouldn't complain, or Miller Lite, sometimes it's just called for short, and I wouldn't complain if I ordered a light and I got a Bud Light. All right, a light beer from Miller and got a Bud Light. They're both in the classification of cold, refreshing beers. They're not too hoppy. They're not very hoppy. They're not. They've got a beer flavor to them, but they're not. They're not too heavy. They're not too strong. The flavor is snappy, especially when it's cold and freshly out of the can. And it's not bitter. Not bitter at all. And if you don't like beer, you're not going to like this beer. But if you don't like bitter beer, you can drink this. It tastes like beer without the bitterness that you've come to expect from an IPA. And now, what used to be the evil corporate beer, and now for some reason is woke. I'm going to have to look that up. Coors Light. Well, to be fair, it's the brand Coors, the company Coors, which by the way is Miller Coors or something like that. These two beers are owned by the same company. So I could have gotten a regular Coors banquet beer, but I wanted to go light for this taste test and just take it here. Excuse me. This has a slightly different flavor. It's a little bit less beery, truth to tell. I don't want to make it sound like it's more watery, but the flavor isn't as distinct. It's got a different angle on it, and I don't have enough vocabulary to describe, I know that there's sweet, sour, bitter, and there's a fourth flavor, and I forget what it is. But it takes a slightly different angle. All right, so let's jump back. Okay, we've had the Coors. And by the way, I've had a decent breakfast, so I'm not drinking on an empty stomach. If I were drinking for recreational purposes, I forgot to mention, Sunday tradition in America is to drink beer, despite the blue laws in certain states. But I'm neither in New Jersey, where you can't buy it, or Utah, where you can't drink it at all. Just according to Reputation. I don't know for sure. You can look that up. Anyway, it's because men watch sports on Sunday. Sunday is a great day to watch sports because you go to church in the morning and all the sports are in the afternoon. You go to church, and then you have Sunday brunch with the family, and then if it's football, you've got two games, one at 1, one at 4, and if your local team is playing, then the network that's got your local team plays your local game. And if your local team is not playing, the network selects some game that's supposed to be important, and you get to watch that anyway instead. Though sometimes it doesn't quite work out as planned, as in some boring game between two important teams is the one you're stuck watching, while a really exciting game that changes the face of football is only in its local markets. And that's what happened to a particular game by the Giants in the middle of the 1986 season, which is one of the greatest seasons by a football team ever, even though they lost 2 while other teams have lost 1 or none. But anyway, so I've had the Coors. Let's try the Bud Light again. Okay. Yes, the flavor of Coors Light is closer to water than the flavor of Bud Light. The flavor of Bud Light is closer to beer. So that's like the old joke about drinking American beer. Why is drinking American beer like having sex in a canoe? Because it's fucking close to water. All right, so now let's just rinse that and try the Miller. Excuse me. All right, there's the Miller. Again, the Coors is like water with a slightly bitter beery aftertaste. The Light from Miller is more like beer. Now I'm going to try the Light and the Bud side by side, only the Light first. Excuse me. Okay. I suspect that the Bud Light's going to have more flavor than the Miller Lite. Hang on. Getting gassy here. No, I don't think it does. Or maybe they're all starting to water down on me. Well, just so you know, I don't usually drink beer this fast. I've got a pretty good constitution for not getting drunk too fast, for holding my liquor, as it were. And also, a bunch of years ago, I had a very bad high school reunion experience, and I don't remember most of it. Okay, that was the experience. I drank too much too fast. I was euphoric and hopped up on Monster Energy drink and had not had much sleep. When I got there was only half an hour left in open bar, and I made maximum use of it, and I really don't remember much of the rest. And I just didn't drink for months and months after that. I used to drink because I thought it was what grown-ups did. I thought it made me a man. I would hang out with people who drank like that, and I had some very interesting drinks that I could tell you stories about. And I survived the telling. And I've made a mistake or two. Fortunately, nothing that I couldn't fix afterwards while I was drunk. I'm glad to say that none of my drinking led to anybody dying or getting seriously injured. I did, however, lose my tickets to the Comic-Con and all the comics that I bought that morning at the Comic-Con because I left my bag in the club when I left, and blah blah. But I mean, there was so much else that I could have lost that I didn't. So lucky me. So what else? So anyway, so like months after that, I didn't drink at all except. Well, let me just back up a little, and then a certain thing happened in my life that made me just want to be drunk all the time. Basically, it was my ex-girlfriend and his wife were... no, this was before that person realized that they were trans, so they were technically a lesbian couple. I'm not going to oversweat the terms on this. Let's just say that they were in their room and kept on forgetting to do two things. Put their clothes on and close the door. And they were all over each other all the time because it was the greatest relationship that either of them had had in their life. Whoopee them, yay me for introducing them, but we still all lived in the same apartment, and their doors was open to the kitchen. So I basically made sure that I had the largest, cheapest bottle of vodka handy at all times to add to whatever I felt like drinking at the moment. And I must admit that for the better part of the following year, I forgot what either Coca-Cola or orange juice tasted like without vodka in it. And if I would travel, like go on a bus or a train or a plane, I would always make sure I'd have a drink before I got on. I'd make sure I keep that nice happy buzz during the walking through the airport, and getting on, sitting on, and getting off the plane and so forth. Whenever I'd go to a movie, I'd make sure I'd have a 40 in my pocket or in my bag or something. You know, I'd keep a happy buzz for a lot of events. I'd make sure that I keep a happy buzz at parties and so forth. Going to a Renaissance fair or something, I'd start early. I knew the thing about how you really should start your hard drinking first and work your way down, because if you're at the beginning of a party, you're smart and you're sober, right? Now, if you take the hard drink first, Oh, I can see all you people there watching me. Hi there. I can't read it because it's too bright out here, but just follow along here. I'll check all your text messages in a bit. If you're, this drunk, this sober and this smart at the start of the party. Oh, here it is. This is how drunk you are, not this is how smart you are. So if you take your first drink and you make it really hard at the start of the party, bam, you get drunk, but you're still smart enough to know you're drunk. Right? So you're not going to make do anything stupid, right? Now, as the party progresses, as the evening wears on, your level of smartness is going to go down, right? So your level of drunkenness ought to go down also. So if you don't do it this way, right? If you start with the light beer and work your way up to pure grain alcohol, by the end of the night, your smartness will be all the way down and your drunkenness will be all the way up. And that means you'll be too stupid to know that you're too drunk to do anything. That you're too drunk to have any inhibitions, so something really stupid and bad is going to happen, right? But if your drunkenness and your intelligence go down at the same time, then by the time you're stupid, you will still have all the inhibitions you had when you were sober. And therefore, you'll know that now that I'm sober, if I ought to drive because I am sober. And that's something that you don't have to be smart to realize. You have to be stupid and I'm smart enough to know that all these other people are drunker than me, so they should not drive. So therefore, I got to nut up and I got to drive. Okay, so give me a glass of milk, all right, so to give me some fortification, some healthy fortification so I can get into a car and drive, and maybe a Coca-Cola or coffee for caffeine. By the way, caffeine doesn't get you sober, it just makes you a wide awake drunk, but if you're wide awake not drunk, at least you can drive better than if you were drunk. Anyway, so that's it. Because most people, they start here with their smarts and here with their drunk, and they're here at the end. All right. So if you're here and here, you're drunk, but you're smart enough to know you're drunk. And when you're here and here, you're stupid, but you still have all the inhibitions you had when you were sober. So, so that I got to be drunk all the time. Once they moved out of the house, I was just only drunk when I wanted to be drunk. And that was pretty much any time that I was, mingling or traveling or stuff like that. Or social. I didn't get drunk at home much. No, not much. But after that party, just the mere taste of alcohol. Let me try this now. Just that sip. And I would know that's alcohol. And that would give me a sense memory of how terrible I felt the morning after with that hangover. All right? I'd had hangovers before, but none quite as bad, not just about the hangover, but also about everything that I didn't remember happened to me at that high school reunion. Okay? Would all come back to me when I would take a sip. Yep. Bud Light has a stronger beer flavor than light beer from Miller, and Coors Light has the least beer flavor. Light from Miller is somewhere in between, but it leans more towards the Coors level than the Bud Light level. So, yeah. I could not have done that for the better part of a year after that party. That first sip would make me say, this makes me remember what happened when I drank too much. And even that little sip reminds me of it, and just the memory of it is enough to make me not want to do it. All right? Nowadays, what I do when I go drinking is I always order whatever the drink is. I order the one drink, and I get them, and I have a glass of water. Sometimes I say, let me have a whatever. Let's say a vodka martini with olives, no ice, and because I want to be sophisticated that night. And I'll say a glass of water with a slice of lime and a paper umbrella, so I can pretend it's a cocktail. All right, or maybe I'll just have a plain old glass of water with my martini, so people know that I'm sophisticated but smart. And holding up a Bud Light and saying I'm sophisticated is totally the antithesis of sophistication, okay? But yeah, I'd drink, right? And then I'd start to feel the effects of it. And so I'd follow up by water. Incidentally, black absorbs heat. That makes what's inside hotter faster than, say, blue, white, or silver. And it may also be that this is plastic and not aluminum. And it may also be that there is less water than there is beer in either of these, in any of these cans, because this water is now warm. It's not room temperature, it's warm room temperature. It's nearing air temperature. I don't know what the air temperature is out here. I'm going to guess we're in our 70s. Probably we're in our 70s right now, because I'm feeling zero chill, except for maybe the breeze here. It was like under 60 in the morning, but we're in that time of temperate spring here in this temperate zone where it's cold at night and warm in the daytime. But the beers are still cold. Even the metal, the aluminum, is still cold to the touch. Okay, now I wanted to line up all the beers with their labels, names, brands horizontal so that you could read them easy, so that I wouldn't have to turn it sideways. But here's the funny thing I noticed. These two have vertical versions of their things, so that when you lay them down, I guess you can choose whether to front the merchandise with the name this way or this way. But light beer from Miller, it's the same both ways. Huh. Okay. So, just a little bit more beer trivia then. Yeah, I told you about how Bud Light was stole the name of a beer out in what's the country that surrounds Budapest? Budapest is Austria, Hungary. Budapest is in Hungary. So I want to say that Budweiser is in one of those Germanic nations. You can look it up. And here was the funny thing. They started to market their beer in America, but Budweiser, these guys, Anheuser-Busch, who, by the way, own a lot of brands of beer, by the way. So stopping to drink Bud Light, you could cut Bud Light sales by 20%, and it would barely be 1% of Anheuser-Busch's sales. And a drop in the stock price from 64 to 61, not a big deal. It goes up. Things go up and down by that much, in a month, in any month. All right. But again, Bud Light's backpedal. Yeah, not too keen on that. But you know what? They specially made a rainbow printed can for a transgender fan of the brand. All right, what the fuck's wrong with that? Show me on the doll where it hurts that someone who happens to have born with a genetic gender makeup that's a little bit off from the rest of us happens to be choosing to live the life of the gender that his software feels more like, even if the hardware doesn't match it, right? Tell me how that hurts you, okay? Tell me how that hurts your kids. Oh, my kids are going to be transgender. Well, you know what? This whole argument about, it's kind of like this whole argument about cultural appropriation, all right? Cultural appropriation, that's where you take something from another culture and just put it on because you like it, without any appreciation for where it came from or what it means or what part of its original culture it is. And that could be anything from a white guy with dreadlocks to Michael Jackson wearing military badges. All right. On the other hand, if you take the time to learn a little about their culture, you appreciate what a particular, say, element of clothing means in that culture, and you want to express, and you find that that sings to you, then why not? All right? That's cultural appreciation, like the young black girls who are taking up Irish step dancing, all right? And they're winning awards with it. Ooh, culture. No, come on, man. Look. American tap dancing is supposedly actually a black appropriation or appreciation or adaptation of Irish step dancing. Maybe. There's a Broadway show called Paradise Street. Paradise Square, one of those. And I saw that with a friend of mine from the Holland Children's Theater Company that I knew many years ago. And while the script was a little corny, the acting was good. The dancing by Bill T. Jones, brilliant. The music, wonderful. The lead female, knockout, out of sight. As my friend said, who is Beyonce? She's the one who won the Tony for best female performer in a musical. And they had black and white dancers in a dance-off of Irish step dancing versus the tap dancing. And there was a TV program that had all about percussive dancing. And at the end, they actually had a dance battle and then combination of dance between an American black tap dancer and a white Irish step dancer. I'm not sure if that was the same show. No, that was a different show. I remember when Sammy Davis Jr. and Gregory Hines were having a dance off, and Gregory Hines just finished it off with yup, bada, bop, and clicked his heels twice to finish off the shave and haircut 2 bits, and what's his name? Gregory Hines just knelt down and kissed his feet. But Gregory Hines did a movie called Tap, and in it there were both black and white tap dancers. So if tap was developed by black people, white people do it too. Fred Astaire. Is Fred Astaire the Elvis of tap dance? Because Elvis gets accused of ripping off black musicians all the time, and it is true that black people wrote some of his biggest hits, a lot of his biggest hits, especially in the early days. Hound Dog was originally done by a black woman, but Hound Dog was written by a couple of white Jewish guys who were saying about Big Mama Thornton, tell her to sing it more angry. You tell her to sing it more angry. And yeah, rock and roll in general can be, rockabilly was the rock and roll when rock and roll wasn't anything else. But some scholars, and not unjustifiably, will say that rhythm and blues was rock and roll before rock and roll existed. And some people can say that the difference between rhythm and blues and rock and roll has to do with the addition of the twang of the guitar and the lack of the horns and the country rhythm and stylings that the rockabillys put into it. But you know what? It's still rock and roll to me. But here's the point that I was trying to get at. Appreciation versus appropriation. And what does this have to do with transgender people? All right. Well, I'm part of a club that recreates the Middle Ages. And they don't say, hey, what's your ethnic heritage? Okay, if you want to, in this club, you're supposed to make up a persona of someone who might have existed in the Middle Ages, and you gotta be somebody that actually you can trace back to your ethnic heritage. They don't say that. So this gives a chance for black people to be Japanese, white people to be Mongols, Chinese people to be Normans, all right? Whatever you want. And when you're doing it right, you did the research. You did the research not just to find out about the clothes they wore and the weapons they used and what kind of tent they camped in and the food they ate, but why? they wore those clothes, how they developed it, what their culture was about. What did it mean to be a knight in that culture? Or if that culture called it samurai, what did it mean to be a samurai? Okay, what does it mean to be a samurai? You know, how would people in that culture, if they were of the noble warrior elite, relate to their king, their shogun, their emperor, their Kaiser, whatever they call their head man, you know? And by giving this game, giving these people an opportunity to appropriate whatever culture they desire, it gives them an opportunity to appreciate the culture. And this one woman, a black woman, very smart, very talented, and at sewing, and a very strong personality, sometimes called the force of nature. I interviewed her about, you know, this society I'm talking about is over 50 years old. The section of it that covers the Northeast now, used to be the entire east half of the U.S., had just gone 50 years old. And she said, more people should try appropriation, then they might understand other cultures. So you know what? When your son says, Dad, I want to be a girl. Now, several ways we can look at this. I'm going to try this one just to... Okay. Could be the kid's acting out. Could be the kid's tired of being ignored and is trying to do something to get attention. Could be the kid was indoctrinated in school by learning that, hey, that gender is a spectrum and that there's a little bit of the other gender in all of us. And so, hey, maybe I want to try to be the other one just for a while. And maybe, just maybe, they're one of those 1.6 million people or so in America out of the 330 some odd million who really does have a genetic hiccup that means that the balance of what makes a person a man and what makes a person a woman isn't quite settled in the way that it is in most of us, and that's why the software doesn't match the hardware. And there are tests, physical and psychological. They can measure things like, hormone levels, testosterone, estrogen, and so forth, and talk to them to figure out, which of these this might be. And the medical establishment has set these parameters for how you do this. And so, but here's one thing. If they are, kids like things that are unusual, things that are new. When you're young, everything is new, okay? When I was a child, everybody's name was just as weird as mine, okay? So, Zorikh was as strange as Alex, or Robert, or Bob, or Jenny, or Mary, or Elizabeth. It wasn't until I went to a brand new school in the second grade when I was 7 years old, and absolutely nobody in that school was somebody that I knew from my previous schools. I kind of wondered why my mom sent me there. That I found out that Zorikh was a strange and unusual name. And thus did my social development suffer accordingly, because now it's been almost 50 years and 40 some odd years, and still I wonder, what do people talk about when they introduce themselves and they don't ask you about your name? All right, but the point being that everything's new. And when something's cool, when something sounds good, something sounds interesting, and something gets attention. There was a character in a movie about a couple of fighting fish, and his name was David. David was kind of a cool sounding name. And nobody in the class was named David. And everybody wanted to be David when we would run around saying, I'm David, playing make-believe. I'm David, I'm David. So yeah, you take a couple of 5, 6, 7, you take a bunch of 5, 6, 7-year-olds, whatever, maybe even 8 and 9-year-olds, and they find out about something new, especially if it's something that their parents don't like or don't know about. Hey, I know something my parents don't know. It's called transgender. Maybe I'm one. Yeah, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to identify as transgender. See what that's like. Well, you know what? Let them try. All right? Now, if they have fun being a girl, if your son has fun being a girl, wearing the clothes, calling himself Elizabeth, and hanging out with the girls, while the girls do girly things, then, you know, either A, maybe he should have been a girl, either B, maybe he's gay, or maybe 3, he could be perfectly straight and 100% male. He just happens to have a fondness for this, to be sensitive and creative and like sewing and cooking, you know. And, you know, none of those things are wrong, all right? Or he could walk into some place where people don't like transgender people, and when they see someone dressed up as a girl and they realize they're a boy, then it could be a whole boys don't cry thing, and the guy could get the shit kicked out of him. Your son could get beat up, and then they'd certainly get some negative reinforcement against dressing like a girl. And then they'd learn that it's okay to beat up people, that it's expected of them to beat up people who dress like girls, to beat up boys who dress like girls. Is it right for boys to beat up other boys who dress like girls? Is it right for anybody to beat anybody up? So a guy dresses like a girl, so fucking what? All right? That would be this beer. All right? It gives him pleasure. It gives him joy. Now, we're going to start talking about sports teams, right? So, Leah Thomas and other trans women. All right. Well, why do we have gender divisions in sports? On the one hand, it could be social. You don't want to have straight men and straight women mixing in the bathroom because mixing in the locker room because straight boys can't control themselves around women who aren't wearing clothes. Here's a crazy idea, folks. Teach your boys to control themselves around women who are not wearing clothes. Okay? How difficult is that? All right. Now, in order to get your documentation changed from male to female, or to put it another way, from what the doctor thought you were when you came out and he didn't have a chance to talk to you because you couldn't talk, to what it turns out your software was programmed for, and you're in the process of changing your lifestyle and whatever else is necessary, if necessary, medically so, to fully live that life. Now, just so you know, I looked it up. Only about 25 to 35% have the bottom surgery, or the snip, if you're talking about male to female. Most transgender people, most people who were born, the doctor said, it's a boy or it's a girl, but realize when the time comes that they should have been the other thing and live their lives as the other thing, still have those particular body parts, all right? They just live as that, okay? So, but part of the issue is that already hormone levels are different than they are for, I'm going to say average instead of normal, because normal sounds like a value judgment, average men and women, and they may be taking hormone suppressors or additional hormones of the gender that they feel like they ought to be, so really their body's not acting like what the doctor thought it was when they first saw them. Their body's acting, hell, their body was already acting like the other way, because the brain is a part of the body. And when you touch someone there, and there would have made a man do this, but a woman, But if you touch someone there, and it would have made a woman do this, but a man do well, that's a pretty big clue that that person ain't what they look like. All right, ain't what the doctor thought they were. Let me rephrase that. Okay, and how does it hurt you for that person to go and do what needs to be done to live their lives as what they feel like? All right, now, if what you feel like has something to do with how you react towards people who feel like the opposite gender, well, obviously that's not true in all the cases, because homosexuality is a thing. So what do we do about gay men in the boys' bathroom? What do we do about lesbians in the women's locker room, huh? Can homosexual men and women keep their hands off of people of the same gender when they're not wearing clothes? Why don't we teach them as their children to respect people as much when their clothes are off as when their clothes are on? Just a thought here, folks. Is that so difficult? Is that so against your sense of priorities? All right, I'm going to keep on dancing between these just because I don't want to favor any of them, because, I'm not really a light beer drinker when I do drink beer, but, these are working for me. So, if we are dividing genders in sports because of what happens in the locker room, then the gender a person feels like they are should be the definition of who gets to play on what sports team. But whoa, step back here, you say. Men, especially if they've gone through puberty as men, has greater bone density, greater muscle mass. The hips are narrower, the feet are in the line, the elbows don't splay out, etc., etc., etc. So therefore, it's just wrong for biological males to be competing in women's sports. Look at Leah Thomas, look at that MMA fighter, All right, fine. Then let's not call them men and women. Let's call it by what you're judging it by, just bone density and muscle mass and that sort of things. Bone density and muscle mass. Wait, if I said bone density, then it would be muscly mass? Or whatever. Anyway, bone density and muscle mass. Yeah, and let's have bone density and muscle mass at this level, bone density for one bunch. Let's find a border, okay? Let's find a border and over-under between majority female and majority male with regards to bone density and muscle mass amounts. Test people for that, and then divide them that way. All right? Now, here's a funny thing that makes me think of. That makes me think of the way the dominant melanin demographic of the Old South would try to prevent the minority melanin defined demographic of this Old South from voting. All right, we're not keeping black people voting; they just have to pass this literacy test. And since public schools were not open to black people or whatever. Did they even have public schools before the American Civil War? I'm not sure. But since most of the black people in the South were slaves, and they made sure not to educate slaves, except the good ones, then we could be pretty sure that, if they couldn't pass a literacy test, then they wouldn't be able to vote. But tell you what, let's just jigger this literacy test so it's actually impossible to get an answer. And I've seen some of these literacy tests, and they're stupid questions. It's like, if woodchucks chuck wood, then what color is this fence? Stupid things like that. So yeah, there were questions with literally no answer. But they would only give it to first-time voters And since all the white people were already voting, when a black person would show up, they got the test. Sorry, you didn't pass. All right. So saying, let's test for muscle mass and bone density kind of sounds like you're coming up with some kind of excuse to separate men from women. Because most women have lower bone density and muscle mass, and most men have more muscle density and bone density. You get what I'm saying, right? So, but you're the ones who said that there's a difference. You're the ones who are complaining that the people who identify with a gender for social reasons, I just feel like a woman and I want to live as a woman and I want you to call me a girl. So I should play with the girls' team. You're saying that the whole problem is not because they want to be a girl. The whole problem is because they are physically a man. Well, then tell you what. Let's test for that. All right, and then stop calling it male or female, so that way you get the best of both worlds. The athlete who wants to be known as a woman gets tested for whether or not they have a certain level of bone density and muscle mass, so that way they can compete on the same level with the bone density and muscle mass of people that share their bone density and muscle mass. So that way people with lower bone density and muscle mass can have an even playing field so that they can compete against each other. All right? Because truth to tell, average is not all. All right? Was it Jacker Jr. Kersey or Forrest Griffith Jr.? I get them too confused because I don't follow them that closely. But one of them was in a TV commercial where they said, I can run faster than 138 men in the world. I'm just going to drink this now. And you know what? If those 138 men are not in the same race with her, she's got a good shot at finishing pretty close to the top. All right? In golf, in auto racing, you don't have to win in order to be successful. In auto racing, it's just about screen time. I don't know how they measure monetary success and sponsorships in golf, but there are women in golf and auto sports who have gotten enough screen time or whatever else it takes to perform at a level that they can live off the sponsorships of it. All right? Now, of course, some sports are going to be more, in some sports are not quite as limiting to people according to certain of their natural physical characteristics. Pretend I said something that made sense, all right? You kind of know what I'm talking about. Golf, auto sports, those sorts of things are not quite as limited by physical characteristics as, say, football or basketball or so forth. But in the semi-pro and minor league levels of some of the semi-pro, minor league, smaller league, even recreational levels of these sports, there are women who have competed at competitive levels, at professional levels, at paid or sponsored levels, in games, in competitions, in races with men, and done well enough to keep their pay. Okay? Even in the highest level of ice hockey, there have been female goalies. All right? So where does it hurt you to just call the spade the shovel and test for what you're complaining about instead of what doesn't matter? Okay? Whether or not Bobby becomes Roberta, all right, doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt your kids, doesn't hurt the greater society. It's not a Satanist thing. And even if you believe in that there is a Satan, and that this Satan person works to seduce us fragile, seducible souls, to prevent us from getting into the gateway of heaven or whatever, that doesn't matter in the eyes of the law. Lauren Boebert is wrong. The church does not tell the government what to do in this country. First Amendment. Congress will not make any law respecting an establishment of religion. So God said that there's only a man and a woman doesn't count in the eyes of the law. And in the eyes of medicine, it's not true either. Okay? Both psychological and biological medicine have figured that. Nature is a spectrum, a heavily weighted spectrum, but a spectrum nonetheless. So, Bud Light, fuck you for backpedaling so hard. Thank you for, sending that rainbow can to what's his name that I never heard about until she became a news item. Light beer from Miller. Thank you for finally admitting what anybody with an ounce of sensitivity realized, is that a world in which women wear nothing but bikinis and want to have sex with men who are drinking beer is unrealistic. And not backpedaling back quite as hard as Bud Light did. And Coors. I forgot exactly what you did that pissed him off, but thank you for doing that. And before I go too far, because I still remember the days when I heard that you put formaldehyde in your product and were union busting, engaged in union busting tactics. I'm going to do a little bit of research to see more research what your company's been doing lately. Excuse me. Oh, and by the way, a little thing about Coors. Coors was legendary because it was made from the mountain water in the Rockies, and so yes, people would drive cross country to get some and then drive it back because it wouldn't survive the trip from the Rockies to other parts of the country. Beer has an expiration date. So, what's it called? Samuel Adams, the first craft beer that I know of, actually made a marketing gimmick out of that. The radio commercial had a sound, something like clop, and the guy's saying, "That's a overdue. That's a bottle of Sam Adams that's past its expiration date." Clop. And you can just imagine him throwing it against the wall. But anyway, so what Coors Light did was they would ship their beer in a concentrate, and it would be rehydrated with local water, and people were like, "Oh my God!" And that created a backlash against Coors, and then Coors came out with a TV commercial that said that had the president of the Adolph Coors, oh God, what a name to be stuck with, the Adolph Coors Brewing Company at a mountain spring saying, "This is the water that we use to rehydrate our beer. Mountain spring water just as fresh and just as pure as the water from the Rockies that we use back there. And we make sure that our beer that's shipped across country gets rehydrated with water like this." Well, I have no idea if that's true or not, but I did see the commercial. It's true that they did make those commercials. So that's just a little Coors history for you. I'm probably not going to finish these beers, and I'm going to decide whether to put them into empty bottles and drink them later, or just water the yard with them, because some beers do look, because I don't know, I'm not a big beer drinker these days anymore. I'm pretty much a one and done when I go in the bar, and sometimes I'll just as soon have a rum and coke as a beer. because most of the beer choices are IPAs now. And frankly, I prefer cider. I find cider more refreshing. If I want a cool, fresh drink, I want something like apple juice with a kick, and that's apple cider for you. So, anyway, I know I rambled a bit, and I have no idea how long I did. I see a bunch of you have tuned in and put messages there. I'll read it later. You know what the fuck? I'm going to read it now. Okay. Whatever. All right. You all have a great Memorial Day weekend. I may do some yard work. I may go try to finish American Nights 2018. I may go for a run. I got work again tonight. And I got to do stuff regarding my mom's future. So, and a whole lot of other things. So let me go do that. By the way, just so you know, this book was propped up by the same books I've been using to carry in my backpack when I'm running, or some of them anyway. Alone by Michael Korda, who is the son of the film director. That's about Britain and France in the German invasion of France during the 1940s. In 1940, one of the best balanced books that actually explains the French experience of that, because most of it is just from the eyes of the British. Anyway, The Normans, which is basically a collection of the Austrian men-at-arms books about the Normans in one volume. The Year of Lear, about, what is that? The year 1606, the year that Shakespeare wrote King Lear, and a DK Editions coffee table book about World War I. All right, so I don't think I have anything else interesting to say or do. I love you all. Captain Zorikh. Decent hair day? Yeah. Is coming at you. Zorikh, the only Zorikh spelled that way in social media: YouTube, Facebook, MySpace, Blogspot, and captainzorikh.com.